Not all ministries are created equal. We're breaking that down today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu. A.J.,
Hey,
how are you, my friend?
I'm well. How are you today?
I'm good. Welcome back to the United States. We mentioned in last week's episode that you were not going to be in the country when that episode dropped, which was true.
That is
You
true.
were in Ethiopia, actually.
Yeah.
So, welcome back from Ethiopia. Can you give us the 30-second recap of what you did?
Yeah, 30-second recap is we had over 100 church planters. They were actually from the Assemblies of God denomination in Ethiopia at the headquarters in Addis Ababa. And we walked through, the primary things that we talk about here in healthy church structure, being Great Commission focused, organizing ministries in the church to accomplish specific discipleship goals, and having a vision for the future for planting their churches. Some of them have already launched, some of them have not, maybe kind of split on that. So they were super pumped. They're operating under a vision. They have cast vision as a denomination to plant 1,000 churches this year, which is
Wow,
a
that's a
huge
lot.
goal
Yeah.
and would effectively double. They've got about 1,000 churches right now. So there is a vision to double the number of plants in the country this year, which, hey, man, I'm all for big God-sized goals. So
Yeah.
I think that's really great. But their invitation was to help those churches go deeper in maturity and in discipleship, and not just be surface level, like quick, like, okay, we call it a church, but there's nothing really happening there. They want to make sure that they really are discipling people into disciples who make disciples. So
Yeah.
it was super fun. It was just awesome. And now our stuff has been translated into the Amharic language.
Yeah.
And so they had our workbook resources in their own language, and it was a super great week.
Yeah. Man, that's great. So
Yeah.
welcome back. We're glad that you're home for a few weeks anyway before you head back out. So we just want to thank you guys. You know who you are, those of you who support our ministry. It really makes a difference. These kinds of trips, they impact thousands and thousands of people, but they also cost a lot of money. And so we appreciate those of you who invest in that ministry, in this ministry. And if you want to learn more about the kind of work we're doing and how you can participate in that, you can go to malphursgroup.com/donate to reap some of those kingdom blessings that come from
Mhm.
supporting this kind of work. So one more thing, AJ, by way of announcements before we hop into today's episode. We have a guide certification event coming up April 8th through the 10th. It's going to be happening in Fort Worth. So this is for people who think, man, I would love to build a consulting ministry. I would love to be doing the kind of work that we're doing, helping churches get healthy, making disciples. The way that the certification works with the Malphurs Group is you invest in a certification process with us. We get you trained up in all of our resources, materials, frameworks, and all of that. And then you go out as building as an independent contractor, building your own consulting ministry, and we give you everything you need to be successful in that. Folks who go through the certification process, AJ, they're able to recoup their investment in the certification after their first church. So if you're serious and you want to build a consulting ministry, a revitalization ministry with churches, or if you are like a director of missions or associational missionary, and you already work with a lot of churches, this is a great thing to add to your repertoire, your toolbox, to be able to be working with those churches in your network or in your association. If you want to find out more about that, go to malphursgroup.com/certification. You can get all the details about what certification looks like. And then at the bottom, there is an application. Kind of let us know that you're interested, and we can begin that process of seeing if it would be a good fit for you. So
Yeah.
anything you want to add to that, AJ?
No, that's for the right people, for the people that have a heart for that, to build the church. They want to help churches to really to thrive. It's really great. So yeah, we've got a great team now, and we would love to add you to it.
That's right. All right. So today on the podcast,
Oh,
we're
one more. Since we're doing announcements, we
okay.
still need volunteers in children's ministry. Please sign up.
The nursery's getting crowded. We really need some people to rock some things.
Come on, people, step up. Okay.
That's amazing. All right. So today on the podcast, we're continuing our discussion in our non-series series on sort of the fundamentals of church revitalization that we're going back through. And we're talking today about continuing in discipleship pathway. Last week, we talked about what is a discipleship pathway and what isn't a discipleship pathway. And we talked about how we focused on how a discipleship pathway includes both evangelism and edification, and that it should be a positive feedback loop. So we've got evangelism in word, we're proclaiming the gospel and people are responding to that. Then they grow in the faith, they grow in their knowledge in the word of God and in relationship with one another. And then that leads to transformation, which leads them to live differently in the world and gives opportunities then for people to hear and respond to the gospel. So then it creates this positive feedback loop. And so in its simplest form, a discipleship pathway is a defined process of steps to help people understand how they can take their next best step in growing as a mature disciple of Jesus Christ. Is that the
Yeah.
did I encapsulate that? Okay.
I think you encapsulated that. Yeah. We use the word intentionality a lot because so many churches we find it's just not there. It's just doing something more so because it's just always been done, or maybe somebody had a good idea to try something. But yeah, a healthy church with an effective discipleship pathway is operating with intentional outcomes that they desire to see happen, and they're structuring then to achieve those outcomes. So that's what we like to see in an effective discipleship pathway.
All right, so then that leads to the what I feel is kind of an obvious next question, which is, all right, we're talking in a abstract way about process. What does that look like in a real world scenario in the church? What do we do with programs? Do programs have no role? What are we doing? And so, put simply, we want to shift from the church has, especially in the United States or the West more broadly, had sort of a programmatic view of discipleship, that it's a program's first view rather than a process first view. And so we're trying to just invert that and say, okay, we want to start with a process, which is what we focused on last week. And then the programs exist only to facilitate the process. So the programs themselves are tertiary. They're tools to facilitate the process. And they're fungible in some sense, and so we can move them around, we can change their purpose, we can even eliminate them and kind of replace them. And we'll talk more about that later. But at the bottom line, programs facilitate the process, and there are two key kinds of programs or ministries: primary ministries and secondary ministries. And so today, what we want to do in the podcast is kind of outline what is a primary ministry, what is a secondary ministry, and then I want to end the episode by highlighting a couple of key pitfalls that I see churches fall into often as it relates to primary and secondary ministries. So that's the introduction. Where we're going. This is like the hard work stuff though, AJ. This is not a fluff episode. Like we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start off talking about primary ministries. So our discipleship pathway is just going to be a few steps. It's not supposed to be something complicated. that is difficult for people to understand. It needs to be really simple. And residing in these steps of our pathway needs to be one primary ministry. And a primary ministry is something that we want everybody to engage in. It's going to be our primary communication point, and it's going to be our primary collecting point for people in whatever this step is. And again, the discipleship pathway has steps to it that when executed on well and people are engaging in it, this is their best opportunity to grow in the faith. So a primary ministry, again, it's going to be primarily what we direct people to, and it's going to accomplish the most that it can. We want it to be have the greatest efficiency and effectiveness, because the bottom line is the time that we have with people, Scott, is limited. We don't, maybe a few live in a church compound in which this is their entire lifestyle. Most of us, we've got homes and jobs and families and this entire life that we're living. Now, it should all, of course, be in devotion to God and living out our faith, which is what we go for in the church. That's the transformation that you just mentioned earlier. But when we go to the building that we call church, or we gather together, whatever that looks like, it's very, very limited. And people do not devote more than sometimes just a few hours a week into that space. And so this is why this is so important, and why we drive this so hard to churches. We've got to maximize that time. And this is what primary ministries are designed to do, is to maximize the time that we have with people so that they get the most out of it in life transformation. So these are limited to one per step in the pathway, and it's what we put a lot of work and weight into.
Yes. Yeah, this is the main thing here. You pick one thing and you want everyone to participate in it. This can be difficult, I think, for some when they're talking about outreach, because they go, what's one thing that in that sort of outreach step? What's one thing that everyone can participate in? So maybe a good way of thinking of it is sometimes in a discipleship pathway, we are or within a primary ministry, we're collecting a few things and using a common term or language to describe them. So, for example, let's say we've got a series of, every month we have some outreach event that's out in the community. And, at Christmas time, it's something Christmas related. At Easter, it's an Easter egg hunt. In the fall, we do, or, in August, we do some sort of backpack event. In the fall, we do some sort of a harvest thing, whatever. That can sound like, well, hold on a minute. That's not a primary ministry. That sounds, you've already described 4 or 5 different things, right?
Yeah.
No, we could call them go events. Hey, these are our go events. And so our expectation is that every person in our church would help to support, and invest their time and attention and energy into our go events. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so sometimes
yeah, that's right. Instead
it's
of
an
like
ongoing thing.
Yeah, it's more of a being engaged in the area of the step rather than one particular thing. Yeah.
Correct. So but what we're trying to do is clarify language so it doesn't feel like a menu of 100 different things.
Yeah.
And we're trying to clarify, this is the one thing we want you to focus on, in regards to this step. And so you might have a lot of different small groups, but you're going to use the same terminology to describe all of them so that people don't feel like I need to join 4 different small groups.
Yeah.
And so people understand, all right, I need to engage in a group and build community, and these are the outcomes that I want to get from this. I want to build relationships, and I want to be praying for other people. I want to be growing in the word. So we're focusing on the outcomes, but we're using unified language to describe one primary ministry in each step of our discipleship pathway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of churches have a step in their pathway simply for service to the church, an internal serve step. And so again, in that way, the act of engaging in that step is to be on a serve team, wherever that might be, serving hopefully in your greatest gifted area, that you become passionate about in the church. So the entire church should be serving, but it's not one thing, it's wherever you might fit. And so the act of being on one of those serve teams is your engagement in that step of the pathway.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so that's what a primary ministry is. And I don't know that there's too much confusion around that. I think people can understand, although I would contend that most people have not highlighted what their primary ministry is. I think they can
Right.
conceive of that, and
Yeah.
they maybe even have one by default, but I don't know that they're thinking of it as a primary ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And which leads to the problems with the secondary ministries, which is I think is where the real clutter and problems occur. So let's maybe move there.
Yeah, that's true. I guess let me just tag on then, because not all, and even in the, my little teaser at the beginning, not all ministries are created equal. Sometimes things that might be sort of similar, without defining what's the best one to be in, people can lose out on something. They might, it might look like all of these could kind of be primary. But if you don't do one, or you choose to do something different, what you get out of it might not be as full. And so that's why we do want
Right.
churches to focus in on what is really the primary thing that we're asking you to do or to engage in here. So yeah, with that, let's jump into secondary ministries. Secondary ministries are intended to support a primary ministry, either by just the nature of what it does, or by something that would move people into what the primary ministry might be. Let me just kind of throw down an example to kind of kick this off, Scott.
Okay.
We're just mentioning like a serve step. Again, the primary ministry is your engagement in serving, and that's a process. A secondary ministry to that, though, maybe it's really sort of part of the process, would be determining where should I serve? And so maybe that's a class that people would go to learn about their
Mm-hmm.
spiritual gifts. And
Yeah.
so, like, hey, have you gone through our Serve 101 class?
Mm.
And you're like, oh, okay, well, tell me about that. So, well, yeah, it's 4 weeks, we go through this. And then you'll discover maybe where your passion is and your gifting to serve in the church. So that's a great secondary ministry that is going to funnel people into the primary ministry, which is serving in the church. So
Right.
that's just one example of something that could be maybe a temporary thing or a stepping stone into something else.
Yeah, so I always like to say the purpose of secondary ministries is to provide support or to supplement the primary ministry. So it's a bridge to it, or it fills in. I don't want to say it fills in a gap, because a good primary ministry doesn't have gaps, but it can maybe enhance it in some way. So for example, we might have we may have a philosophy of ministry that says we want to see deep spiritual mentorship happening in the church, where we've got more one-on-one or super small groups, right? But we recognize not everyone is going to engage at that level. So we don't want to make that the primary ministry, because we don't want to basically gatekeep and keep people out of growing. So maybe we have our primary ministry is life groups or whatever. And then maybe there's a deeper level within life groups that's, discipleship, like mentorship program. And so that's a secondary ministry that's almost like a level deeper. So you can think of it like a good secondary ministry enhances or supplements by going a level deeper, or is almost like a pre-step to or a bridge to the primary ministry. So we have, you know, these sort of short-term small groups that do 5 or 6 week runs, with the intention of trying to get someone plugged into a long-term small group. So it doesn't exist just to be another option out there in the ether. The sole purpose of it is to get someone plugged into the more permanent long-term group. So you can think of it, a good primary ministry functions in one of those two ways. It's a bridge to the primary ministry, or it's a deeper enhancement of the primary ministry. And if it doesn't fill one, this is the hard thing, AJ.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't fit in one of those roles, it's probably not something that your church should be doing.
Yeah, because we can collect things, we can take up a lot of time, we can confuse people, or maybe even leave them thinking that they're they have it all covered.
Right.
But maybe what they're doing. Let's talk for a minute about men's Bible study, women's Bible study.
To me, this falls into that category. It can fit in either one of those slots. So we can say, all right, we're going to use a men's activity or a women's activity as a bridge to a more consistent group. Because you could have, let's say, life groups is I'm just making something up, but let's say that's your primary ministry in that step.
Yeah.
You could have women's life groups, men's life groups, mixed gender singles. You could have, and they could all be in the category of life group, and then you could have these sort of on-ramp events or programs that help people get plugged into one of those. That would be a possibility.
Yeah.
Or you could say, hey, we have these life groups that are all mixed generationally and gender and whatnot. But we have these men's groups and these women's groups, which are a level deeper. It's like a level deeper of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can have these, these kinds of relationships where people are being mentored or prayed for in a way that you can't accomplish, in a life group. So it can work, but it has to have a point, and you have to be clear about what that point is, and not just go, which is what we mostly see is people go, well, yeah, that's kind of happening. No. It's got to be really clear what the role is. Otherwise, we'll talk about this in a minute, but otherwise your communication will be wonky and people won't know where they should be investing their time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. This is where sometimes, changes need to be made in ministries. We need to, it's important then to define with intentionality, what does a life group look like in our church? What do we do? What are the functions? What are people going to experience when they're there? And it has to be consistent across all the groups. Otherwise you get unpredictable outcomes. So what does a life group look like? What, if we do Sunday school, what happens there? What does that look like? What is the function? What's the outcome? And then that then would help us define what our secondary ministries would look like. What is a Bible study? Is it just that? Is there fellowship involved? Are we praying? These are all the details that we have to get into. And it can't be left just to say, hey, let's start some Bible studies, or let's start some small groups. And we've got a few people that said they would lead, and then that's it, like, hey, go do that and do it however you want. That's kind of the point of this, the point of an intentional discipleship pathway, in defining what the ministries are in it, so that at the overseeing leadership level of the church, we know what's happening. I mean, we have well-defined ministry function, so that we can work all these pieces together to the good of the people, to increase them in maturity and life transformation. So leaving things to chance and open-ended will lead to unpredictable results, and be harder to change later.
Yeah, I think one other point I want to make before we move on to sort of some of the pitfalls in planning your ministries is we have to get away from the only metric we care about is attendance.
Mm-hmm.
You can have I'll give I have an example in my mind, but I'm not sure if I want to share it so clearly. Let me see if I can genericize this example. So imagine that you have I don't know, let's think like a fall festival type event, okay? And it's really well attended. And then you also have a trunk or treat event, and it's really well attended. And you've got these two events, and they happen in the same month, okay? And at neither of these events is there any sort of call to action or next step, not really following up with guests, not really making any sort of connection. There's no And I don't know that at every kind of event like this, you have to have some sort of like altar call type situation. Like that would be maybe be awkward. But there's not really any intentionality in getting people plugged in. They're just like fun things that you do. Okay. If you only judged it by how well attended it is, you would never eliminate either of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But that can't be the question that matters. The question has to be, what were we trying to achieve with this that actually moves the ball forward? And sometimes the goal is simply community awareness. Like we want to be recognized by the community so people know that we're here, and we want to collect as many names as we can so we can start forming a relationship. That's a perfectly fine reason, but that has to then be the reason. You have to have defined that and be intentional about it and do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's what would eliminate some things, because for a minute there, a bunch of listeners were like, "Oh, good, we can do that just for awareness." But no, with intentionality to connect with people so that we can then start building a relationship with them. And that's where they're like, "Oh, we have to
Right,
work. We can't just
right,
have
right.
something fun."
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. It's like, no, you got to, and it would even have been progress to even to go to just one event versus two events. And this church actually did. They did. They went from two events to one event. It was way better. And it really, it was a significant improvement to condense from two of these events to just one of these events. So props to them. But um, that being said, if if success is only measured by attendance, you will miss the mark.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to eliminate things that people don't go to anymore. It's much harder to start eliminating things that simply don't have a point.
Mm-hmm.
But real progress comes from having the ability and the wisdom to do that, which is actually kind of a good segue into maybe our next section here.
Yeah. What are some of the pitfalls?
Okay, so the first pitfall I want to highlight is the challenge of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So at the heart of this is prioritization. So when there is a real or perceived sense that all ministries are created equal, going back to your teaser, then people don't know where to invest their time,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll pick the thing that's the easiest. So, if you're promoting small groups alongside the trunk or treat, alongside the mentorship program, alongside volunteer opportunities, and everything's getting the same level of attention, what do you think people are going to? They're going to go to the trunk or treat only because that's the easiest thing to do and the thing that seems the most fun, and the other stuff kind of sounds like a lot of work. And so people can then deceive themselves and go, yes, I'm really involved in my church just because they're showing up on Sundays and they're going to the fun things you're planning. So if you really want people to take a next step and really start investing, you have to start over communicating the things which are important and unhighlighting, so to speak, sort of taking a little bit of attention away from the things that aren't as important. And so this is the biggest mistake I see churches make is they just read off all of the announcements
Mm-hmm.
and pretend as if they are all the same, of equal importance, and they're not. You've got to be sure you're giving disproportionate attention to the things that are disproportionately effective at making disciples.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Another pitfall that you need to be wary of is that it's not a set it and forget it scenario. I've created a discipleship pathway, and look at this, we got great ministries, and now, okay, that's done. Let's just go into maintenance mode, and that's just not the right way to be looking at it. We have to be monitoring things, which requires evaluation to make sure that things are still good, and this really does take intentionality as well, Scott, because it's not like everything is going to be completely different. Well, except for 2020 when we had a pandemic. For the most of the time, things change rather slowly. I mean the technology changes, that might drive people's behaviors, or just cultural things that happen, and different things that are very slow. where we might go years before we realize we need to make a change. It takes real intentionality to monitor that on a shorter scale basis, to be just keeping an eye on things, and making changes to these ministries, primary or secondary, as needed, without letting things go 15, 20 years. And then we're like, oh, this is not good anymore. People just don't
Right.
engage this way.
Yeah.
So that's the pitfall, is monitoring our ministries to make sure that they're still effective, working well, and that we're getting out of them what they were designed to get.
Which leads to the third and final pitfall I want to highlight, which is what I've called just program creep. You can, over time, you can just start accumulating ministries. I think you mentioned this earlier, but you can just start kind of building them up, and you have more and more things. You start things, but you never kind of cull anything. Now, COVID killed a lot of ministries and churches, the stuff that was easy to get rid of, that no one cared about, or everyone agreed it wasn't working anymore. I've heard from some churches that some of those you've got some zombie ministries now where people are like wanting things to come back that had gone away. I would encourage you, if you've made it this far, if you've made it to 2024 without bringing some of these things back, probably in 9 out of 10 circumstances, you should keep it in the grave.
Mhm.
But it's easy. I've said this earlier. It's easy to eliminate the things that aren't working anymore, relatively speaking. Easy to. It takes real leadership to make tough decisions about things that you evaluate and go, this just isn't effective. And that can be especially hard when it's well attended and people like it. But I'll give just a personal example. And I may have given this example at some point earlier in the podcast, but I don't remember. So it must have been a long time ago if I mentioned it. When I was doing student ministry at a church here in Tennessee, one of the programs that we did, or one of the events that we would take students to, I did full-time middle school ministry. So I was working with just 6th through 8th graders. And one of the events that we attended was something called TCTC. This is a Tennessee Christian Teen Convention. And but in addition to the Tennessee Christian Teen Convention, we also did a fall retreat, and we also did a spring trip to a program called Believe, which is a retreat just for middle school age kids. So we had these 3 big events. We had one that was kind of in the fall, one that was sort of more in the winter time, and then one in the spring. But it was really expensive. It was expensive for parents to send their kids on 3 retreats. And my having gone to TCTC, my first year, I felt like TCTC, they let middle school kids come, but it's not designed for them. It's a little above their heads. It's not really built for them. It's really best for high school students. And so now this is something that they had been going to TCTC for years, long before I got there. I don't know how long, 10, 15, 20 years, a long time. And this is a thing that a lot of kids, when they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they're looking forward to getting to middle school and they can start going to TCTC. But I just evaluated it and felt like this doesn't make sense. It's not a good fit for middle school students. It really puts a burden on parents. It's a lot to do 3 events like this in one school year. I think the obvious thing to eliminate is TCTC. Now, how happy do you think some students and parents were, AJ, in that decision?
Well, no, you can't please all of the people all of the time. So, yeah, I'm sure some percentage of that directed their wrath towards you.
Yeah. The only comments I got were negative ones. I didn't get anyone say, wow, this was really wise for you to pare down and to clarify and streamline the ministry like that. No one said that. I didn't hear from a lot of parents. I think there were like 100 and some kids in the youth group, but I only heard from like 3 parents, but they were all mad. All 3 of them were angry. And I couldn't make my decision based on that. I knew what I was doing was right. It was better for the students, and it was better for the ministry. And I stand by it. I look back on that and go, that was good. I'm glad that I did that. I'm not saying those decisions are easy, but I think leadership is the ability to make the right decision, not just a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And not trying to pat my own back in any way. I'm just wanting to use a personal example, and I know that that's hard. It was not fun to receive those criticisms, but I knew it was right. And so think about all the programs that your church is running that you didn't start, but you're continuing. At some point you have to do an evaluation and go, is this the right thing? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? And even though it's popular and well attended and all these things are not good reasons, it
Right.
needs to have a point and it
Yeah.
needs to fit.
You're going to make people mad anyway. You might as well do it and achieve something good out of it.
That's right. People are going to be mad at you. That's right. So just accept that fact and then do the right thing.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. There you go. All right. So primary and secondary ministries, it's important to have the intentionality of designing the discipleship in our churches to have outcomes that are going to help people truly grow in their faith and in maturity, so that you can present them full in Christ. So that is the point of the discipleship pathway. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, Scott,
Yeah.
for us to talk about primary and secondary ministries today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you want to read more on this topic, go to malphursgroup.com/226. This is episode 226 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. Reminder, one more time, if you're interested in becoming a guide, this is a process that we help churches with. So like you might be thinking, how would I even do this? How would I evaluate my ministries? How would I figure out what to do with them? This is the kind of thing that we do when we work with a church, going through strategic envisioning.
Mhm.
And if you think, wow, I would love to learn how to do that too, and maybe become a certified guide with the Malphurs Group, go to malphursgroup.com/certification, and you can get all the details on learning what that takes.
Thanks for being with us, everybody. We'll see you again next week.